Good afternoon. It's 2:30 on Wednesday, October 19th of 2022. And this is the regular council meeting for the town of Home Hardware in the town of Rocky Mountain House. Yeah, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I have some changes already given to me for the agenda before we adopt the agenda. I would like to move 9.2, which is the letter from Minister Shandro about anti-Semitism, to 8.2 for discussion. And we're going to add to closed session, section 21. So it would make in the closed section 14.3, section 21, intergovernmental ICC discussion. And then section 17, disclosure harmful to personal privacy, code of conduct will move to 4.4. Sorry, 14.4. That I do that. Yeah. Was there anything else for today? Okay, Councillor Alt, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. We adopt the amended agenda for the October 19th, 2022 regular council meeting.
Thank you very much. All in favor? And that's carried. So we have no delegations today. Sorry, I'm looking at the delegation seat and I see it's on 7.1. So adoption of the previous minutes. Did we have any issues or changes to the previous minutes? Councillor Phillips, did you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes of the October 3rd, 2022 meeting.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So we have no delegation business today. We have no old business today. So we're at 7.1, new business, Town of Rocky Mountain House, consolidated financial statements for December 31st, 2021. And today we have our auditor with us from Baker Tilly. And your name is completely James Wade. I'm sorry, James. I was just gone there. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I guess I would like to first thank Betty and Graham and the rest of the town. Oh, sorry.
They warned me. I'll start again. I would first like to thank Betty and Graham and the rest of the town staff who assisted us throughout the audit. And it certainly was a while. The objectives of our audit basically are our responsibility to express an opinion on the town's financial statements based on our audit. We conduct an audit in accordance with generally public sector auditing standards. Those standards require that we comply ethically. We have ethical requirements and plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance as whether the consolidated financial statements are free from material misstatements. Our statements are prepared for the following users: councils and management, the provincial government, ratepayers and other interested parties and funders of the financial operations of the town. Canadian public sector auditing standards also require that auditor address the audit committee or town council during the audit or as required to do so. To give you our assurance as to the independence, which we do now and have in a letter as well that was provided during the planning phase of the audit, outline the responsibility that rests with the council and management versus responsibility of the auditor respect to financial statements. The preparation and the preparation and the fair presentation of financial statements are the responsibility of the town. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on these consolidated financial statements via the audit report, determine materiality based on needs, expectations, sensitivities of the financial statement users, assessing the design and application of the town's internal control and financial reporting process and recommended improvements. So for 2021, the results and the findings We received the full cooperation of management. We have no disagreements with management that were not adequately resolved. We were not made aware of any potential fraudulent activity. Based on the work, we did not find any evidence of fraud. We did not encounter any other indications of illegal or possibly illegal acts. We will issue a short letter to management with observations and recommendations designed to help improve the town with their system and internal controls and other matters. Matters that to be considered to be significant weaknesses or issues, we would also send a letter to council. And I have the letter today for the council. There's nothing, no significant findings noted in it. So I guess we can just quickly go to a highlight of the 2021 financial statements. So I don't know if you guys have it on your screens, but basically it's a page 1, which is really like page 3 or something. Consolidated statement of financial positions on the financial statements. Do you guys have that?
Yes.
Behind me. So just to touch on a few things, because again, me loving numbers and being an auditor, I could go through all this for quite some time. But we'll just stay for a couple of the highlights. So if you look at cash and temporary investments, they're up to 26 million in 2021 from 18 million in the prior year. That's about $8 million increase, and that mainly relates to increased deferred revenue that you haven't yet spent. Trade and other receivables are up 3.5 million to just around 7,918,000. So yeah, 7,918,000. The majority of this increase relates to receivable from the Regional Waste Authority dissolution, which again, I believe there's a note 4 that breaks all that down. Looking at the liabilities, there is now a bank loan that relates to, I think, the 54th Street Capital Project. It's in the amount of $1.6 million. As discussed above, the deferred revenue has increased 4.7 million, and this relates primarily to the ICIP grant for the wastewater treatment. There is estimated land closure post-closure costs as $1.1 million as well. So those are kind of the changes from the past. When we look at that and we look down near the bottom, we see the non-financial assets increased 2.3 million, which is the capital assets purchased by the town less the current year's amortization. The net result is an accumulated surplus increase of 6.6 million. If we turn the page, so normally one of the things we quickly look at is the budgeted amount and the prior year amount, and they're really comparable in both cases. Your budgeted amounts and your prior year amounts compare very much to your revenue in 2021. The net revenue, I guess, is within 41,000 of prior year and 66,000 compared to budget, which is just extremely close. And I think net municipal taxes are just $60,000 less than last year, which is, I guess, significant to most of the users. Expenses, overall expenses are about $1 million higher, 500 less than budgeted, which is almost directly comparable actually to the year before. Overall operations resulted in about $103,000 of revenues over expenditures before the government transfers and the gain on the Regional Waste Authority dissolution. So if you see that near the bottom, you can see where we have the shortfall or revenue, where the budget amount was minus $500,000 and last year was 1.1 million, and there's the 103 this year. And then you add just below it the gain on dissolution and the government transfers. That's how you get to your $6.6 million of excess revenue over expenses, which again tied into the amount on the other page where it was basically your net asset increase. One of the other pages we normally look at is page 5, so it should be 3 pages down. I think it's your first schedule that's sideways, so I mean, for me, there's a staple in the way, but if you have it behind me, you should be able to see it. And so schedule 1, changes in accumulated surplus. And again, just to highlight a few things, at the end of last year, we started with 105,875,000 of accumulated surplus, which included 2.7 million of unrestricted surplus, 15.1 million of restricted surplus, and then 88 million in tangible capital assets. And then you can see the chart goes through and we have our, the things that added. So obviously the 6.6 gets added, and then there's transfers between, if you buy assets or in some cases, if you transfer to reserves, which there was a big transfer this year to the reserves. And then any use of purchasing assets or operating come out of the reserves as well. So when we get down to the bottom there, you can see that accumulated surplus after transfers back are 2.4 million. Restricted surplus increased to just about, $19.8 million, so a $4.68 million increase. Equity and tangible capital assets increased 2.3 million. And so overall, your overall accumulated surplus went from 105,875,000 to 112,500,000. I guess summarizing some of the interesting points here is that basically you had your reserves go up to almost $20 million, which leaves you in a reasonable position to fund future projects. You also have deferred revenue, which isn't included in that 20 million. That's significantly high, just under $8 million. So there's a lot of funds available for the future projects that you have. That's really the main points there. Again, I guess I'd ask you to approve the statements as we're required today if we want to get them out. And I need that one motion to increase transfers to solid waste reserve for $819,179.36, which hopefully Graeme told you guys about. That's already included in here, and that was one of the things that happened for these statements, because it was one of the transfers that you did that needs to be a motion so that we can leave the statements as they are. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them or attempt. Come on, David. I'm sure you got some questions somewhere.
Not so much of the question, but
Or comments.
comment. Thank you very much. I know we've been working at this for several years to get everything streamlined and on point the way it should be. So everything looks like it's going in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I think you have the right people in place to think it'll be a lot smoother in the future.
So we need I'm sorry, we need a motion to transfer the 6.6 million and the
No,
1.2.
No, it's $819,179.36, which we've already included as a transfer, and it's a transfer change motioning from reserves to, or from your restricted surplus to your restricted surplus, or your reserves in your case. So that's really what it is. Is that not correct, Graeme? Amanda?
Yes, going from unrestricted.
Restricted.
Bring solid waste reserve to $2 million and cover off any liability that the town is taking on, which is so just over 1.1 million.
Yeah, so we've already included in here with the assumption that you are going to approve it as per Graeme's direction.
Can you give us that number again?
819,179.36.
Yep.
I know.
I couldn't see it where you're pulling it off, but it's not in the
Oh,
statement.
it is. It's
it's just-
included as a total. Like if you look on that statement, we're actually looking at, and we have that unrestricted funds. No, sorry.
On page 5, like the second
Yeah, on the
page?
page 5 where we have if you look underneath the restricted surplus category, there's 5,983,000.
Yeah,
It's included in that amount. And
okay,
that's all the amounts that you transferred from the unrestricted to the restricted.
okay, and the 1.15 is for the liability of the cells, right? No.
Oh,
it's-
that's the 1.159.
Yeah.
Those are amounts that you purchase capital assets every year, right? Or, right?
Yep.
And so some of them come out of reserves, some of them come out of the current, some of them come out of grants.
Okay,
And so that's really the amount that you used in reserves for assets. And the 5983 is just increasing it to what you wanted your reserves to be.
where does the 1.2 million that we have to keep for the liability of the cells, where's that at, Betty?
Well.
That-
Doesn't show on
that's- I
page
think
5.
that's
It-
Partly why they moved this journal entry is because we set up a post-closure liability cost of 1.16 million.
Yeah,
So we need to make sure we have that much in the waste reserve. And this journal entry that they want to make will make sure that it's moving the money into that reserve, so it will stay there.
it is on page 1. If you guys look at page 1, right under liabilities, there's a landfill post-closure cost for 1.116. So you had, that's your liability, and so then you're just, they're not direct, they're indirectly related.
What, and the reason it's not the same amount is because we already had some in
In
there.
reserves, yes.
That was, I'm like, why is it not the 1 point whatever one? It's 819, 179. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Wade?
Mr. Wade's my dad.
I know. James is my son, so that's gonna be really
Oh.
weird.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Okay, so I can make that motion. I'd like to make a motion for transfer of $819,179.36 from unrestricted to restricted for the balance of the
Post-closure liability.
post-closure. For post-closure of the waste treatment agreement. Waste post-closure liability. I should have got that straightened up before I started making my motion. Post-closure liability. Period. Does that sound like the right motion to make?
Works for me.
Yeah, and that's for the 1.16 to make it 2 million for the liability, right?
What's for 18,1818 or 18?
Yeah, so
809,
819,179.36, but we talked about a totally different number on the weekend for the liability, right? It's just to make it
Well,
up to that
okay,
amount, right?
So what it is this transfer to the reserves is really, as Graham says, funds that now you have $2 million sitting in your reserve.
Okay.
Right? And so you have the reserve, but we've also set a liability amount on the balance sheet saying, hey, we know we're going to have at least 1.1 million of cost. We have a reserve also that's related to this for 2 million in case there's additional or what have you.
Okay.
So they're similar, they're just not the same.
Does anybody have any questions about that motion? Because I think mine are all answered. Okay, so I think I'll call that motion to a vote. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. And that you would like another motion,
Well,
or we need another motion to
You,
accept?
it, for these for these financial statements to be, for me to do a good copy, I need your approval. And in this case, as presented, you probably need to approve the financial statements, or we'd have to not have them done yet.
Just the motion that council accepts the 2021.
Councillor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council accepts the financial statements as presented for 2021.
I see Betty is happy, so I'm happy. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Is there any further questions for James Wade? Before we finish 7.1. I don't see any. Thank you so very much for all your hard work and coming today to present this.
Great stuff. Awesome, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving forward in the agenda, this is to 7.2, the RFD for ATCO franchise fees. Did you want to break for a recess?
No, that's okay. Okay, we're on ATCO.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. This item is to deal with the ATCO franchise fees. They always send letters every year asking if we have to reapprove the rates. So this is council's opportunity to decide what you want to do. I've included more information than I normally do because we were also looking at whether we should increase them. So right now you can go all the way up to 35% as a franchise fee. We currently are at 30% and it was increased in 2015 up to that amount. So in 2022, I think I put a little history in a table. We had $2.5 million of, that's the revenue that ATCO was going to forecast. And it was, they were anticipating that it would generate $761,000 in franchise fees for us. In 2023, their revenue estimates have actually gone down somewhat. So they're only estimating 2.46 million, which will bring us at 30%, almost 739,000. So it's actually a drop of about 23,000 in franchise fees for us. I did contact them just to see what factors were affecting this. And that's partly why I included the table so you could see. So that they have fluctuated a little bit in the past. There's a couple of years where there was some changes. They didn't have any one specific factor, but you know, it's customer consumption, it's weather patterns. If there's any big new developments where they're, you know, increasing their gas consumption. So I'm not sure exactly what, if the weather was maybe a little more mild this year, and I think you might be seeing a bit of a change in consumption patterns with people. You know, they're really promoting more energy efficiency, so that could be why. But anyway, so it's gone down slightly. I also looked at what a 1% increase, what the impact of this would be on ATCO Gas. So 1% would increase the per customer cost by $6.61 per year for a total of 24,000, and it would increase the budget from last year by 1,700. We also talked about the potential of, say, splitting, if we needed to look at the cost of taxes, of increasing some of your franchise fees. And I will address this in the next one as well for Fortis. When I looked at ATCO, it would require 3.75% increase in ATCO rates just to generate the same amount of revenue as a 1% property tax. So I'm using 91,000 as a 1% property tax. So it would take close to 4. And then the other thing I did was I calculated what a 1% tax increase would be and what the average increase for a property owner would be, a residential, and what that increase would be on franchise fees. And it would save them $3 a year. So it's pretty nominal in terms of any kind of savings between the two. So, because the residential 1% in residential tax would be $28 and ATCO would be $24.77. So I guess that's up to council to decide what they would prefer. I also looked at And there is a listing of all the municipalities. But for the North Rider A, there's 98 munis that charge this fee. Of these, 81 are under 30, 8 are at 30, and 9 are over 30. So the majority is below. I don't know if you want to have a discussion on that. I'm kind of looking at, it's a really nominal benefit to a property owner to split it with this. The Fortis is a little more, there's much more savings where it's about $14 per 1%. So if you did a 2% increase on Fortis, a resident would save $28 a year. So just so that you know both sides of it. Is there any questions or comments?
Counselor Phillips has a question.
So just more of a comment. Looking at the ATCO franchise fees and then looking further down on the agenda, the Fortis franchise fees. I see what you're talking about with the offset taxes and what an increase in either franchise fee will do as opposed to an overall general tax increase. And it makes sense that we're already at 30% on ATCO, raising it much more. We can only go to 35. That's the max. So I would be in favor of just leaving this one as is and then looking further on the agenda at the Fortis fees.
So I'm all about affordability of citizens to live in our community, and the same thing of increasing by 1% also does the same thing for decreasing by 1%. So if we decreased 1% off of the 30 to 29, Sylvan Lake is at 27, Rimbey's at 26, Eckville's at 20, Drayton Valley's at 22. Those are our neighbors that we're competing with for citizens. It would do the exact opposite. It would give a cost savings to each consumer in our community of $6 off their ATCO utilities, and not change their property taxes a whole bunch over the big picture of things. And I know that we're kind of going the other way because of the shortfalls of the budget, but I certainly would like to see, seniors stay in their homes long as possible, and they're on a very fixed income with grocery increases and all the other increases that we're faced with. I kind of sort of was looking at the opposite. I just wouldn't mind bringing it down 1%. For that cost savings for your utilities every month for people who are really struggling in our community. Because I think it's important. Counselor Hutchinson.
That was gonna be one of my questions. Can we decrease in the future if we choose to?
So that, well, they do ask it once a year. Now, I'm not completely sure if we could do mid-year changes. I've never seen it done. They'd probably have to go back to the AUC and get approvals if we wanted to change it. Unless you know something different. Okay. So yeah, I'd have to inquire, but I'm sure you could have, but I wouldn't recommend doing it halfway through the year. And you can decrease the rates. It would drop your revenue for ATCO gas by let's say 25,000. So we would need to find that someplace else in the budget, but you certainly can decrease the rates.
Yeah, I'm just, it's becoming increasingly difficult for people to make those choices. And you can always buy a smaller house, right? You can always downsize and buy a smaller house, but your utilities, some of these fees are delivery fees on fees. I mean, you can make those changes. I just want to make it affordable for everyone. When all the meetings we go to and they talk about senior housing and affordability and things like that, maintaining our utilities at a reasonable rate in competition with Sylvan Lake, Rimbey, Eckville, those are I don't see the County of Clearwater would go probably with Blue Mountain in some areas, but it's just, if we're only going to make $24,000 out of our whole budget and it saves each household $661 a month, I would like to go that way, just by 1% and find it in the budget someplace else. Counselor Phillips, I saw that you had. Oh, Counselor.
I am going in the opposite direction. I like the idea that this can generate revenue from other than taxpayers, which is someplace that, that we don't collect that tax revenue from. So I would like to see for an increase in ADCO. I mean, it's only, what was it, 6 something per 1%? No, per year.
1% would change the town revenue by 24,623. It's on page 4 or 5 at the top.
But I'm looking at what I'm in favor of a higher increase, more along the lines of the 3.75, which only works out to 2477 per year per resident.
Okay, Council, I'm gonna shut mine off. So Counselor Phillips and then Counselor.
So part of the discussion on franchise fees as opposed to overall taxation is when you do an overall taxation, everybody pays. Like the residents of Rocky Mountain House pay a tax increase. When we're looking at the franchise fees, this distributes some of that burden over all of the users in town. So right now, we don't collect fees or we don't collect taxes from schools, the government buildings, the hospitals. We don't collect taxes like a property tax. But the franchise fees do get included on those hospitals and those schools and those municipal buildings. So if we look at a overall increase in the franchise fees, it lessens the burden on the overall taxation because we're getting all of the users to pay that as opposed to just the tax rate payers in town.
So I disagree with that line of thinking because now we're taxing government buildings, schools, churches, municipal things. We pay for that. So when the schools have higher utilities, somebody pays for that. Either they have a budget that we pay into for education. The Alberta government covers that. And so I just think that it's still taxing everyone that lives here in a different, less direct way. And I disagree with taxing people that we've originally dedicated that they don't pay taxes. So like, why would we want to increase utility costs on our hospital or other places that we originally in the big picture of life deemed that they shouldn't pay property taxes? Why would we want them to pay utility taxes? I just think that it's working against the direction we want to go in. Counselor Phillips.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kraus, but 16 or 18% of our overall tax base is non-taxable when we're talking schools and hospitals and.
Yeah, that's approximated. I'd have to
Yeah.
look at our assessment, but it is like 16 or 18%.
So further your question, Mayor Beach, the reason for looking at the franchise fees as opposed to an overall taxation is if we do a 1% or 5% or whatever tax increase to the residents of Rocky Mountain House, that's money that 1% or 5% or whatever it is comes right out of their pockets. If we look at the franchise fees, it doesn't all come out of the ratepayers. The schools, the hospitals, they will pay part of this as well because they're already not paying municipal taxes. This is a way, like I said, to spread the burden or spread the taxation burden, not just to the residents, but also to the hospitals and schools and municipal buildings.
Yes, we pay for the hospital and we pay for the schools, maybe not directly through property taxes, but taxpayers in the world, citizens in the world pay for schools and hospitals. And so I just disagree that it should be applied, that the argument that raising this incurs taxation for schools and hospitals when we've, got policies in place. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying that if you're saying we're going to charge 16% of the people that shouldn't be paying municipal taxes, this is a way to get them. I disagree because we pay for it somehow. Like we as taxpayers pay for schools and hospitals. So we're actually charging ourselves more in the long run. by taxing schools and hospitals.
I just want to clarify a couple points, so just so that everybody's, I mean, put it clear. Looking at this, the franchise fees are they're not a tax, they are and I do reference it. They're paying for the right of ways, so it's a franchise fee, but really the electrical and gas are paying for the use of a right of way, so the strategy that we're actually discussing here is really looking at sort of moving the burden off of taxes to another source of revenue. So I wouldn't call them a tax versus a tax. So it is a little bit different. The other thing, and I did download all the tax data I could get and the assessment or the franchise fee data, because I was trying to look to see if I could see any obvious strategies with other municipalities that, you know, these guys had really low taxes, but high franchise fees. And I did not see that. In the past, I've worked for municipalities where they have their franchise fees set as high as they can. So I think a lot of municipalities, they're not necessarily connecting the two. They're just saying, we want to get as much revenue as we can, period, for the municipality. So they might have a high tax rate as well as a high franchise fee rate. So there's not really a correlation that I saw when I looked at them. So I just wanted to clarify that they're really two separate and distinct things. And it doesn't look like most munis have a strategy. Just this was something that we thought we could introduce for discussion, just to try to look at what we could do with taxes. So just to clarify.
Counselor Hutchinson.
Could you clarify too? So any increase, or can I just stick with the 30% that's on there? That is on the bill, on your utility bill. It is 30% of consumption, not all the extra fees that are on our
It's
utility
based on the
bills.
revenues that ATCO Gas generates. So it's a rider. And it's for the use of the right of ways because they've got all their gas lines running through.
And it's
So
this-
if you look at your utility bill, if you use 0 usage in a month, you still pay part of a fee because that's part of what we're taxing. So we're partly taxing the availability that you're hooked up to that utility. There's a fee for that. So if you're hooked up to EPCOR or ATCO, they charge you a fee for that. And it's to pay for the distribution lines so if there's a car accident or a pipe break in the middle of the night, they have money to go and fix that. And then on top of that, we would pay for the usage as well. When you look at your bills, even if you have 0 consumption, there is some charges.
I understand how the bill works. I've looked at my bill and I've just wanted it to be clear
Yeah.
that if your bill is $200, pay now $200. We're not increasing on a percentage of the $200. It's only on the one line that
Correct.
says consumption, so many gigajoules or whatever.
It's not on consumption, no. It's not on the total. We're not raising the bill 1%. It's
No, we're not.
The consumption part, yeah, and that's why, like, they give us a calculator. And that's why, you know, I was able to say it would cost $6.61. And I'm just trying to remember, I'm pretty sure they might have different times for delivery and peak. Because I know one time I did deal with a gentleman that called and said, I can't do the straight math. And I did try to contact, I can't remember if it was Fortis or ATCO, but I believe there's a complex formula behind it, and it depends on when you're using it, you know, if it's high time, low time. So there could be more to it, but it works out on average that it would be like overall it's 30% that we receive.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. Is there any more questions?
So this would be following more along in our lines of the user pay system. If you're going to use more gas, you're gonna use more power, you're gonna heat your garage, you're gonna run lights when you don't need them. This is based on a user pay system. Is that correct then?
Potentially, and I mean, when I looked at between Fortis and Atco, our franchise fees went down, so there is the risk that if everybody became really efficient in town, our franchise fees could drop on that. So yeah, it is a user pay system. And it's driven by consumption.
Did we have any more discussion? So really what you're asking us is if we'd like to stay at the 30% or go up or go down.
Yeah.
And so that we can finalize that and let Atco know.
And the recommendation was to stay at 30. Just when I looked at it, we'd have to increase quite a bit. And any kind of benefit would be fairly marginal. So I thought it's pretty close to the top already. That was my thoughts, but council can change their mind.
Counselor Phillips,
I'm comfortable with leaving this particular franchise fee at the 30%. I don't see any reason to change this particular one for Atco.
and I certainly would like to see it come down 1 or 2%, so we're more in line with our neighbors, because we're competing with those people. And people do look into things, you know, utility costs when choosing their home, you know, as well as their taxes and everything else. So I certainly like to see it go down 1% so that we're just under the 30%. It's a nicer number. 29 is so much nicer than 30. Is there any other comments?
I would just like to say that I would be in favor of an increase. And to determine that increase would be something council would have to put their input in on.
Counselor Phillips?
Again, looking further down at our agenda at the Fortis franchise fees as opposed to the Atco franchise fees. There is a difference when we're talking a 1% increase in Atco fees and a 1% increase in Fortis fees. In the formula that works out that is it as much of a tax? It's not a tax, but
An
as
incentive.
much of a burden on the ratepayer. So to me, it makes more sense to leave the franchise fees on Atco as is, but address it down in the Fortis fees when we go into the next agenda item.
Well, we'll need a motion or we'll need more discussion. I really think we should bring it down 1%. Let's go. Counselor Boniface,
If there is no further discussion, I would make the motion that we leave the fees at the 30% for the rest of like this year kind of thing, the next year.
all in favor of that motion? Or was there like to be discussion before we vote on that? All in favor of that motion? And that is, oh, I gotta do a count. 4 and then opposed. And that's carried. Thank you very much. So moving forward in the agenda. We're 7.3. Yes, for Fortis franchise fees.
Okay, so very similar concept. We have the franchise fees. It's for the electrical distribution. Currently, our franchise fee rate is at 12%. The cap is 20, I believe. Last year, and it's been 12% since 2017. Last year, we had transmission revenue. They were forecasting 5.5 million, which generates 663 for us. They're projecting a very slight increase of 5571. which is just, I mean, it's not quite $5,000 increase. So the annual cost to a resident right now is $8.78 a month or $105 per year. So based on the estimates that Fortis has given us at the same rate or percentage, it would cost $2.85 increase if we just stayed at the 12%. If we went up 1%, it would increase per customer would be $9.51 increase. So $9.50. And it would generate us 55,000. So again, I looked at how it compares with a property tax increase, and 1.65% in Fortis rates would be the equivalent of a 1% in property tax. And it would actually save a resident $14 on average. So if you looked at anything between 1 or 2%, which is kind of what we had talked before, it could save a resident on average, which is about a $300,000 home, $28 per year. And I did look at other munis. There's 167. There's 52 that have rates over 12. There's 6, including Rocky, that are at 12, and then the remainder are below. And I did look to see if we did a 3.3% increase, it would put us into the 15% range. And I did list the communities, starting with Bowden, that are in the 15 to 16% range. So that there is a few. Some of them are comparable, like Sylvan Lake and Innisfail. Those are ones that are close by us. And then I did look at our comparator towns as well. So that's the group of towns that, through the financial indicator graphs, not everybody's on Fortis. So these are the only ones that are on Fortis, and the average is 12.98. So, and I couldn't see any consistencies. I think people have treated them completely different, just revenue generation sources for the community. So I leave that to your discussion.
Thank you so much for all your work on crunching our numbers for us to make the decisions easier. I really appreciate that, to look at that. I again would like to see our rates stay exactly. I think it's fair and reasonable to stay exactly where it is, as an average, because again, it's a cost of living for everyone that lives here. Like, when we talk property taxes, it's not people necessarily that live here. It could be businesses and things like that. So, not just residents pay property taxes, but they certainly, every resident certainly has power to their house. And so I'm just trying to keep, fees, reasonable for residents who live here.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an easy decision. I think we had looked at this as a strategy. Some communities would look at increasing both potentially, or if you wanted to decrease them, we'd have to find other sources of revenue or drop service delivery. So, I mean, those really are our alternatives. And I don't think this is a discussion that a lot of municipalities would necessarily have or have had. I think it's an idea that's maybe some have looked at, and it's worth having the discussion.
Councillor Phillips.
So looking at the Fortis franchise fee, I mean, we haven't touched this 12% since 2017. So this is going on 5 years now. And looking at the other municipalities that we're comparing to, we are, on a little bit on the lower side of this one. This is the one that does make a more of an impact on a ratepayer if we were to look at a 1% tax increase as opposed to a franchise fee increase. It makes more sense, more benefit to the ratepayers of Rocky to look at this one as a potential increase.
You mean the property owners?
The property owners, yes, because again, the schools, the hospitals, the municipal buildings, that burden gets shared over everybody. And I just think it's a better way to share a burden when everybody will be paying for it, whether it's the RCMP buildings because they're federal buildings. So it just gets spread out over buildings that we're not collecting taxes on right now, as opposed to putting a tax increase on the residents because that directly comes out of the residents' pockets.
Counselor Alt.
I agree with Len. We just went through our service level review and there was lots of comments where the residents would like more. They'd like more rec, they'd like more facilities, they'd like array of things. And I agree with Len being, this spreads it out. Puts us still, even if we went up to the 1.65%, we're still on the low end if you're comparing it with the other municipalities around. I think this makes the most financial sense to bump this one.
Counselor Hutchinson.
I agree. I think, again, the number is what to consider. I don't want to have an increase in our taxes if we can possibly keep from doing that. So I think increasing by 3.3 is a minimal cost to anybody who holds power bill. And I think that would be my vote to go on a higher level for this one.
Counselor Boniface.
I agree with the increase and all the reasons for, but I would like to see us hold off one more year and stay at the current rate for one more year.
Counselor Phillips.
I respect Councillor Boniface's comment on, potentially waiting a year for it. One of the big picture item that we're looking at right now is we're looking at the CPI being anywhere between 7% and 8% this year. If we don't do an increase on the franchise fees, then if we look at keeping the services as is or status quo, we're going to be looking at a tax increase to the ratepayers of town. If we do something now and don't wait until next year, we can mitigate that burden on taxpayers and get it from a different source that is going to spread it out evenly over different ratepayers.
I'll just like to respond to that and then I'll go to Councillor Alt. So cost of utilities going up, it does create inflation, which does create the cost of living increases. So, if we increase utilities, then inflation goes up. And so if we increase utility fees because we're increasing inflation, we're creating inflation. And so I disagree on the principle of that because it's not a direct result. But again, my argument, I think it should stay the same. And I agree with Councillor Boniface for one more year because we're putting it on to schools and hospitals and they're just downloading more stuff onto us, RCMP. So let's do what we can to keep the costs for residents at 12% is a fine finance free. It seems to be reasonable compared to our neighbors, and just leave it where we're at. Councillor Alt.
Just going to remind council, we've held that 0% tax increase for the last 4 years. I don't think it's sustainable anymore. If we don't try and explore the different avenues for revenue, the tax rate is going to go up. We can't keep status quo with all the increases that everybody's seeing around the board with product and supplies and everything else to keep the town moving. So you're either going to raise the utilities or you're raising the tax rate. I think raising the utilities is an easier pill to swallow than going to a tax increase. And we're still probably going to have to do that.
Councillor Caprero.
I agree. Just in that if we are looking at doing any kind of raise, I would rather it be with the franchise fees rather than property taxes. Just even in my line of work, the majority of the comments that I hear is concern of property taxes. And so I think that maybe by looking at this Fortis franchise fee would probably be our best option for our residents. And I am in agreement with Councillor Hutchinson in that I'm thinking, since we are below the average, I would like to see a franchise fee raised by the 3.3%.
Counselor Hutchinson,
Ms. Quinlan, can you just confirm? So a 3.3 increase is only what, $27 a year? What is it, the yearly rate that it would increase?
Yeah, it would be like $27 per year. Did I not put that in? So it would be, yeah, it'd be like $9.51. It would be, sorry, I can't add in my head. Yeah, it would be just over between $27 and $30. But the difference is a comparable increase. So a 1% increase in taxes would, and we are probably going to have to look at some tax increases, is $28. But a 1% increase in Fortis is 14. So if we did that, then yeah, we're looking at potentially saving them about $28 a year. Which, I mean, it's not a lot, but it's less than if we did it all on the tax side.
did we have any further discussion? I still would like to see it stay low. Counselor Hutchinson,
If there's no further discussion, I would like to make the motion that council increase the 2024 Alberta franchise fee by 3.3% to the rate of 15.3%.
I'd like to have discussion on that because there's a couple of options we could do. We could keep the same, we could raise it by 1.65, or we can do it by the 3.3. So before we decide on that, I think we should discuss that a little bit more. Does everybody feel that the 3.3 is fair and reasonable? Or was there other options? Counselor Phillips.
Just, when we're looking at the overall CPI index going up, 7-8%, whatever that's going to end up at the end of the year. We know we're heading down a road that there's going to be some form of a problem because we're having, as Councillor All said, we're having supply chain problems. We're having increased costs to run everything, and it's going up dramatically. It's not going up just little bits. So I think this is a way to mitigate a big tax increase for the residents. So I would be in favor of the 3.3.
Counselor Caprero. No, I'm going around the room for the number.
I've already stated that I felt comfortable with 3.3%.
Counselor Boniface.
At 3.3 and the numbers that Ms. Quinlan has given us it raises things by $2.50 a month. And I don't think that's a great burden. I mean, Tim's coffee is $2.50. So I understand and understand what everybody's saying about taxes now. So I would support a 3.3.
Counselor Hutchinson, confirm. Counselor Alt.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much. So we'll call that to a vote. All in favor? And opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving forward in the agenda, we're at 8.1, a letter from the Royal Canadian Legion regarding waiver of facility rental fees. So that's for the Remembrance Day ceremony. It's the first time they've been able to do it for a number of years, and they're wanting to do it at the community center and see if we could forego those. I just lost my computer. Forgoes those rates. Counselor Capero.
I just have a question. Is this what's happened in the past? Is this typically waived for them?
So your worship, yeah, it is. So the value is about $523. Typically, we do it through our community grant program. So it would be actually council just awarding them a community grant of $500.
Yes, that was gonna be my question is it just not a community grant? And so it would work that way, right? And would it come off our community grant
Yes.
list? Counselor Phillips,
Myself, I would happily see this come out of our community grant dollars. I mean, the Legion not only supports our community now, but there's a lot of veterans that have supported our country in the times when we needed people to protect our country. So I think this is no question that we should do this.
Counselor Alt, do you have a discussion?
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a worthy cause in all respects, but it allows them to include more of the community other than trying to have it in the Legion. Weather dependent, I think this is a win-win.
Yeah. I'm excited that it's going to be in the community center this year, so I'm really excited about that. So would someone like to make the motion then? Counselor Hutchinson.
I'd like to make the motion that we approve a $500 community grant for the Legion to hold their event at the Lousopet Center.
Does it need to be 523? I wrote 523 down.
The council can make it for $523. Our granting program is up to $500. I mean, but it's by policy, so council can.
The total cost that they would need is 523.
Yes.
Can we amend your motion to make it 523 so that it covers the entire?
Would that be the GST? That's no. Okay, so is 500 sufficient or is it 523 on?
523 is the cost.
All right, so amend that to $523.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So the next item was an additional item 8.2 and it's was the letter from Minister Shandro regarding anti-Semitism definition. And I moved it, we discussed moving it to 8.2 to update our anti-racism anti-discrimination policy to include that new terminology. Do I need, so we just need to make a motion to incorporate that?
Yeah, if council wishes, it'd be just a motion that administration amend the anti-racism policy to include the definition of anti-Semitism and bring back to council for review.
Does that sound fair to everyone? Yep. Would someone like to make that motion? I can make that motion. So I will make the motion to have administration edit our anti-racism, I don't know what I called it here 5 seconds ago. Our policy on anti-racism to include the anti-Semitism definitions in the letter. All in favor of that? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So correspondence for information. Is there anything anybody would like to discuss at 9.1 to 9.4, I guess, now that we took that out? Counselor, I'm sorry, Counselor Alt, did you have a comment? Oh, Counselor Hutchinson?
Yes, on 9.3, the letter from a concerned resident on speeding and harassment. When we were at the AM, I know Councilor Capera and I had checked out one of the booths by Global Traffic Group on I guess it's not called photo radar anymore. It's called automated traffic enforcement technology. And wondering if that was maybe something that we could look into to bring to town to, we've had quite a few complaints on speeding in high traffic areas,
In schools.
school zones and whatnot. And not necessarily this particular group, it's just that's the one that we spoke with.
I have like a lot of questions for administration on that. Like other community, not every community does it because there's quite a bit of like, what is the return on investment, I guess, for things like that? Like, is it just, would it be easier to, you know, set up some, like, have some more patrols through park areas than it would be to go through the whole process of installing photo radar? I mean, it's usually just really big communities that have it, like, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
From what we gathered from the presentation, they can go to any, and you're not charged again. Admin would have to definitely do the research, but from what I understood, we don't pay anything for it. Once there's a ticket, we then get a percentage of that ticket. But I think I would, if admin had no objections, possibly look into some type of program like that.
Counselor Caprero and then
Just-
Mr. Kraus.
I just want to touch on that too. The gentleman that I was talking to at that booth, he did mention he would be willing to come as a delegation and give more information to council if that's something we are interested in.
Mr. Kraus.
Yeah, and that was gonna be my suggestion, that we could have one of the firms come to council and provide the presentation. And Councillor Hutchison, you're absolutely right. It's no cost to the municipality. The private firm does the photo radar. And the town receives a percentage of it. There's a lot of communities that do it. I mean, one of the requirements is that you have to have your own police force, in which we do. I would have to check with the Solgen right now, because they did put a moratorium on photo radar. Now that only applies to existing municipalities that have it now or to new. So I would have to check on that first, but then we can definitely invite if council wishes, a firm to do a presentation to council.
Counselor Phillips.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind having a presentation just to see the pluses and minuses of that kind of a program. My first preference would be to target specific areas if we're having, problems in specific areas or specific streets, to have our CPOs and the RCMP go out and, do some enforcement in those specific areas, as opposed to photo radar, because that becomes it's a slippery slope, photo radar. So I would prefer seeing enhanced enforcement in the traffic or the high traffic areas, but I wouldn't mind seeing a presentation just to see what our options are.
Counselor Hutchinson.
From how I understood the presentation, that they do work in conjunction with CPOs and RCMP to look at those areas that are already a high speed area, or whatever our direction is, but I'll make a motion if you want some more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you know, I think, when we're good to go for the motion. So I agree with Counselor Phillips, but I think before we go too further, I want to look at, are we looking at installing photo radar for a deterrent? Because I think our CPOs and RCMP are more of a deterrent, or we just want to look at penalizing and have another revenue source to get the people who aren't following the rules. And I certainly would like to do more on the deterrent. I think that, CPOs in some of our school zones and areas where there are some issues is going to be a lot further ahead. Because at the same time, they can check for registration and insurance, what seems to be like a huge issue in our community. There's a lot of people driving around. They've issued a number of tickets, and also some of the other things. I would like to see that further, but if you want to, it doesn't hurt to have a presentation, but I just first would like to have a deterrent rather than Counselor Boniface has a.
in the past, when there was problem areas within the town, they would do a blitz. So it would be like either a weekend or a week-long event, and it was usually well publicized. You know, it would be on the radio, it would be in the paper that there was going to be this blitz happening. And it was still, even after that, it was amazing how many people either didn't get the message or didn't care about the message. And it definitely made an impact. So possibly the best way to go is to utilize the CPOs we already have, but it wouldn't hurt to take a look at having somebody come in and talk to us. So just so we're informed, and you know, I don't think we should do it as a revenue source by any means, but as a deterrent, especially on school zones and playground zones. We've all seen that happen. So I would be in favor of those.
Okay, is there any more discussion? Counselor Hutchinson.
Well, I guess it is more discussion. It did state in the letter how people understand that our CPOs have limited hours they work and we have limited resources. And we did also discuss prior about contacting them to do the traffic blitz, that we're already on board with that. So I would like to make a motion to direct admin to look into having a delegation or more information on automated traffic enforcement technology. Does that cover it?
Yeah, thank you very much. So all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Is there any other correspondence we'd like to discuss? So we need a motion to accept the remaining items for information.
I'll make a motion to accept items 9.1 through 9.4 as information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm counting my list, but we took one out. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So did you want to go through administrative reports or break first? Because we have lots more on the agenda today. You want to take a break first? Okay, so we'll take 5-10 minute break. We'll meet back at 10:02. Does that get enough time? Yes? Yes? Or do you want to at 5:02? How much time do you think? Well, we'll take a 10-minute break and come back from recess then. So I'll call the meeting, the recess over and welcome back. We are at 10.1 for the administrative reports for the CAO report. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Kraus.
Thank you, your worship. So just to be quick and minding council's time. Highlights for me, I attended the AM conference with council and plus the service level retreat. So over the past month, a lot of my time has been with council. And plus COVID decided to pick on me, so I was out a week. So there was a lot of activity during that time. For legislative services, the focus right now is obviously the by-election, which Ms. Breeze is working on, and plus we a couple of FOIP requests along with that. 3 FOIP requests and communication, obviously a lot with the communicating on our waste program with the switch over this last month has been a major focus there. So not to rush council, but if council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions? So I'll make a motion to accept for information the CAO report. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So moving to 10.2, we have a department report from Recreation and Community Services with Wes Arnett.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so I again will try to keep my report very brief. Busy with budget preparations, service level retreat. One thing of note is that we did get notice from Rainbow Ford that they've terminated their sponsorship as at the end of the year. So we are working on updating our sponsorship package as well as the North Saskatchewan River Park promotional package that was identified in the service level review. And other than that, arena is back to full operations. It's a busy place. Pool is busy. Lessons are starting up again. So I did have a list of all the different items in the pool report that they tackled during the shutdown. And so unless there's any other questions from council.
Will the matrix report be available online? How does that work? It's not complete yet?
The matrix report is done.
Uh-huh.
I believe, do I need to bring that back to council for ratification? Because I know we discussed it at the rec board as well as service level.
Yeah, service level, because I was just curious because we'd done that. We'd done the survey and then it went into the matrix. And so I'm just to give the community the information back again.
It's not a public document at this point yet.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Did anyone else have any questions? No. Thank you very much. So we'll need a motion to accept that report. Councillor Auld,
I'll make that motion.
we need one at the end.
I'll do them all.
My apologies. I'll call back on you again. Rushing and then I'm not doing a good job. Engineering and operations.
It's all good. You've all seen my report. Is there any questions? It's not much change from last time. You've been busy. Good.
Don't have any questions. Don't see any questions. Is there anything
Keep it
you want to
short.
highlight? No, you're just
Nope.
busy.
Trying to keep it short for you guys.
Excellent. So planning and community development.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Well, I like to talk, so I'm going to talk a little about my my department. So yeah, we're still doing our SEEK program. We still have one for pre-qualification for 2022. So that's been a good program for our community. In regards to planning and development, permits are still coming in. The weather is cooperating for development within our community. We have 6 new row houses and a duplex on 58A Street, as well as an infill house being built on 59th Street. So that's encouraging to see. Other things are our department reviewed rates and fees bylaw for our department for service level, and there is no increase for 2023. Economic development and tourism. Our EDO and myself met with Travel Alberta in regards to their studies that they're doing for the David Thompson Country, Highway 11 from Rocky to Saskatchewan Crossing, as well as the Cowboy Trail from Rocky to Cochrane. Our EDO walked Main Street as well as the highway with Community Futures, offering a digital economy program to those businesses. Our EDO, as well as the Clearwater County EDO, is at a minister's dinner this evening for economic developers of Alberta Association meeting. There's some ministers there, assistant deputy ministers that will go from table to table, talk about issues within our communities as far as economic development. So Jeff and the EDO from the county is there as well. Passport to Christmas will be starting up mid-November. Draws will be done on December 23rd. So the chamber as well as county and town are working together for that promotion for this year. Health and safety, our 3-year safety audit was completed and we had a final mark of 81%. There's some minor corrections that we'll be working on to make our safety program that much better. Protective services, a little lighter month compared to other months, but 67 files, 17 violation tickets. We were down one officer. We have hired a new protective services CPO, Francois Sad. He's in training right at the moment up in Lac La Biche. And protective services helped with the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation Parade on September 30th. And positive tickets are still being handed out to the youth of our community. Any questions?
Counselor Alt.
When do you expect our new CPO to have boots on the ground in town?
Well, we have to wait for the Soul Gen to give designation. So we're hoping by the end of the month, we'll have designation. And of course, there'll be some training involved with our existing peace officers before he's set on his own. But ideally, we're hoping beginning of November will be in the vehicle.
Thank you very much. Counselor Caprero.
I just have a quick question. I was just wondering how the pickleball courts were coming along.
The pickleball courts?
Yeah.
They're in the process of they're tearing down the trees and leveling out the dirt and mainly taking the trees down presently on that site.
Is it kind of projected now that the rest of it being finished will be into spring or?
Yeah, it'll be springtime. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was some sort of delays, right, with the.
Well,
some sort of permit or
I'm
something?
not really sure what Mr. Kennedy was, doing exactly, but it's his project and he's driving it. So.
Thank you very much. So that was planning and community development. So we now go to corporate services.
Good afternoon, your worship and council. Most of our month has been spent doing analysis on various items. Basically wrapping up the year end and the annual financial report and going into budgeting, and reviewing things. Any questions?
Usually you have a lot more to tell us.
Hard to be short.
Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions. Mr. Alt or Counselor Alt, did you want to make a motion?
I just make the motion, we accept the department reports for information.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion, and that's carried. So moving on to 11.1 with the action list, Mr. Kraus.
Thank you, your worship. So just going through the action list, everything is in progress. It's still outstanding. So for the skateboard park, council asked that money to go in the budget. That is now in the draft budget for 2023 for council to consider. Same with the off-leash dog park. Mr. Swader is still working on the Bowers parking lot. Oh, no, he just confirmed he's done. So we'll cross that one off for the next council meeting.
And so that was completed for that same amount, right? The amount that's listed on that was completed for the $2,600. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's a three-year one?
Town Christmas tree, that's in progress. We're buying lights for one tree this year and 6,000 is going to be put into next year's budget for council's consideration. The electronic mailing of tax notices, that program is running right now. And I think that covers all of the outstanding items.
Thank you very much. If there are any questions or other comments? Seeing none, did you want to make a motion? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a motion to accept the action list as presented.
Thank you very much. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So do we have any administrative inquiries this afternoon? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Do we have any notices of motion? Seeing none, we'll move forward. And so we will take a 5-minute recess before we go into closed session. Thank you very much. So we've just come out of closed session and there's no further business for this meeting. So I will call a conclusion and adjourn the meeting for October 19th, 2022 for the regular town council meeting.